it was you, really. It was Matt Bellina's video and posting that I just happened upon, and I was like, oh my God, like there's something out there that actually is working for people.
I will tell you that since I got my first injection, my disease has stopped progressing, and I'm grateful for that. I don't know if I got NurOwn, but I'm hopeful that NurOwn and other promising and proven treatments in the pipeline will get to people living with ALS soon, and that finally ALS will be a treatable disease, a chronic disease.
Hey everybody, it's Mike Hinson here with ALS News Now and No More Excuses. What you just heard was a clip from a podcast by the ALS Association of a lady named Betsy McCormick, actually Elizabeth, but she prefers Betsy, and this is her right here. This is Betsy and her lovely family. They live, oddly enough, right here in good old Tulsa, Oklahoma. I actually live just outside of Tulsa in a small suburb, but interestingly enough, Betsy was in the phase 3 NurOwn trial, as you heard her say. And of course, the rarity of this trial is pretty high. You know, it's 200 people in total, as you can see from this graphic. 200 people were in this trial. And I was also one of them, full disclosure. But the drug that she's talking about is made by Brainstorm Therapeutics. It's now in its 10th year. That's right. 10th year of development. And one thing we've learned so far is that this product, NurOwn, works. This will be the last video that I do about about the NurOwn Phase 3 trial, because quite frankly, there's no point in wasting any more time trying to prove something we already know is true, that this drug is effective for many people. It is not a cure for ALS, and that's just fine. You heard Betsy say it best, that ALS could be and should be a treatable chronic disease. And I won't speak for her on time frame, but what I can say to you after researching this and spending the last 14 months working on this battle, which we'll talk more about later, that this therapy, withholding it from you or your loved one any longer, is a tragedy. We have a tragedy right now in ALS that one day will be looked back upon as a terrible, terrible injustice for those like myself or like you who are watching their bodies deteriorate and die every single day, knowing that they should have access to this drug but can't have it. This is inhumane. It's, in my opinion, medical discrimination, because what we've seen happen with COVID, the rapidity and the just absolute sheer abandon that drug is, or that disease is being treated with, how aggressively. And so we'll talk more about that later, like I mentioned. But for now, what I'd like to do is give you more detail about Betsy and about her experience in the NurOwn trial, so that you can hear once again something that we must now accept as fact, that NurOwn works, number one, and it works in a certain number of people. So let's hear Betsy now tell us a little bit more about her experience in the NurOwn Phase 3 trial. Thanks for watching. And how are you doing, Betsy? And tell us a little bit about, just introduce yourself, if you will, and we'll go from there.
Hi, Mike. It's great to be here with you today. Even just across town, it's like 100 degrees in Tulsa, so it's probably better for both of us to be inside and in the air conditioning.
Agreed.
Yeah. So I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I've lived here for about 15 years. I live here with my 3 kids and my husband. I'm a professor at the University of Tulsa. And I first got connected to you, Mike, through a mutual home healthcare worker, right? Through through Donna, who is a lovely, now happily retired Donna.
Amazing. I know.
Who,
so sad for us.
Who talked to me about the work that you were doing. And I met Donna right after my diagnosis in January of last year. I think I've been more fortunate than many people in that I noticed something wrong with me late in 2018, and I had a diagnosis. I didn't have to struggle to get the diagnosis that I got for too long. And it was completely unexpected. I mean, I think if I had suspected that this is where I was going with the testing, I probably would have just procrastinated and maybe put it off as long as I possibly could before facing the reality. So it was really it was a huge shock to me to get the diagnosis. By June of last year, I had almost completely lost the ability to walk. I was using a walker. When I don't actually think I met you last year, Mike, but I did come to the No More Excuses demonstrations in DC, and I met Annie. And I met Annie and some other folks, and I was using a walker, really struggling to sort of move around. Just in that 6 months, and now I use a wheelchair full time.
By the way, that event you were speaking of now is almost 1 year ago from today. It was actually, I think, June 12th, I believe. It's pretty close, within a few days here. So tell me just briefly about how you heard about the NurOwn Phase 3 trial, if you will, and what kind of got you excited about that. How did you come to find them and really want to say, yeah, this is for me, and commit to that?
When I first got my diagnosis, like many people, I was told to make my bucket list and to get my affairs in order. I went to Mass General. Okay. Right after my diagnosis. I made an appointment there, really to get a second opinion and to learn about what my options might be.
Sorry, just to interrupt you there for 1 second. Was that because of their reputation as far as Dr. Sokovich? And okay.
That was because of their reputation and the Healy Center. And of course, absolutely. I live in Tulsa. Wasn't convenient. It wasn't easy. Absolutely. But I would have gone anywhere to try and figure out, get some better answers. I can't say enough good about everybody I encountered at Mass General.
Absolutely.
And their clinical trial coordinator talked to me about the various clinics, various trials that were going on.
Okay.
And because that's what they're supposed to do, she couldn't really say, oh, you should do this one or you shouldn't do this one. Everything is presented very objectively. These are the kinds of results that we've had. You can get on and look at, the data from phase 1 or phase 2 from different trials.
Right, but they can't sell it though. And so they
can't sell it, right?
Right,
they're very. So I wasn't at that point. I thought, if I only have 3 years to live, I don't want to be spending my time traveling around the country. I want to spend time with my kids. I'm not going to do this. And I'm not going to do it because there's a 50% chance I might get a placebo.
Yeah.
So I just kind of put it out of my mind. I said, I'm not going to do it. So that was in early February.
Interesting.
And then, Mike, it was you, really. It was Matt Bellina's video and posting that I just happened upon. And I was like, oh my God, like there's something out there that actually is working for people. And we know that this man is getting it because he's getting it off trial, right?
That's correct.
And
yep, the only one. That's right.
And I have to tell you that, and so then through you, I heard about other people that were having positive impacts, right?
Right.
But it's because of that I thought, okay, I might be able to live with this disease. I might be able to eke out a few more years. I might be able, to look at Matt, I might be able to reverse my symptoms,
Correct.
And it really gave me hope that I had not had before. And so I really started to pay attention to what was going on with NurOwn. I started to pay attention to what was going on in Houston with T-Regs. all of the things that you had mentioned when we were in DC about the potential, the promising treatments that were out there, really started to pay attention to what was going on with them. And
That's great.
There was a wait list for NurOwn at MGH.
Wow. So you got in right after it had kind of formally gotten filled. And it's interesting you said that.
Well,
and
I actually, so because there was a wait list at MGH, I signed up to do the trial at California Pacific Medical Center in San Francisco. So that's actually where I ended up going. And they're all wonderful too. I haven't really met anyone who is involved on a day-to-day basis with ALS research, working with ALS families, that, you got to be a special kind of person to do this work.
You do. Absolutely. It's devastation constantly. It's constant devastation. So you're absolutely right. And that's one thing I was going to say is that I'm so glad that you found the video, because the trial was not getting full. You just explained why. It's a difficult trial. There was no guarantee. It's 50-50. It's self-funded in most cases. You do get a small stipend, but people need to understand, I think, it's about 15 to 20,000 out of your own pocket, depending on which location you were or how close, and you and I being stuck in the middle of the country, of course. So that's it. And so the trial was not getting full. And I think one of the things that I feel best about out of this whole thing is that, because of these videos and because of all the people that started to come forward, those trials filled up very quickly once people realized, hey, this something could be happening here, right? And so, anyway, so we'll go past that. You start the trial now. Tell us a little bit about your first trip. And I think most people know the way the trial works in general. You get you do the run-in period. We're past that now. You go get your first injection. So that tell us about that first injection and that first procedure you had, and we'll start there.
Okay, so I had my first injection in October of last year.
Okay.
And I didn't have any negative side effects from it. Which in some respects actually made me nervous, like, maybe I'm not getting it. And people say different things, and people say, well, if you feel this or you don't feel this, then, but I guess if I've learned anything about ALS is that everybody's different, and you don't know how you're going to react. Right. So
100% true.
I actually felt really good. I felt positive. I felt stronger. After my first injection, I am not completely immobile. I can sort of use a walker to get around the, it's exhausting for me to use a walker, but I can still do it. Right. And that's kind of where I was when I started the trial.
Right.
And so I had that first injection in October. My second injection was in early December.
Okay.
And my third injection was at the end of February, right before everything shut down for COVID.
Wow, snuck in there. That's great.
In fact, the one thing I'm grateful for is that I didn't have to go back for my final spinal tap, because those were the least fun parts of the whole thing, right? But
yeah, they are. For those out there and watching, the FDA made some concessions for the final in-person visits for some people because of the importance of this trial. The FDA has not been great, but they also have made some concessions to allow this trial to finish. I want to be clear with that. They did allow a few of these things to kind of go by the wayside. Ultimately, as you know, Betsy, the thing is that people either with ALS, you either stop progressing or you keep getting worse, and there may be some in between there where you slow down. And so, but patients, we know our bodies, right? This has been my number one complaint, really, frankly, from day one, is that you don't need much so-called data or biomarker or all this. The scientists want it, but for patients, all you have to do is ask us, right? So tell us a little bit about what you started to notice or didn't notice. Nobody knows for sure what we got, but tell us a little bit about what was your first indication, like, oh man, something may be going on here.
Yeah, so, and I think you know this, Mike, even from our earliest communications, I was really worried about saying, oh, I got it and it works, because, I don't know. I didn't want to mess up the trial data. I just, I thought, well, we'll just wait and see. So I was kind of on the fence. Did I get it or did I not get it? And what I told myself was, if I got it, then it has stopped the progression of my disease. If I didn't get it, then I'm a really slow progressor all of a sudden, which I wasn't before. I'm a really slow progressor, and I'm grateful for that.
Right.
But the truth, the reality of it is that from the time I started in June until I got my first injection, my disease did progress, right? Like I did get to a place where I lost strength in my legs. I lost some core strength. Not much, but things that I could notice. And but since the time of my first injection, it hasn't progressed at all. It hasn't. I don't have it. I don't have anything. No impact in my upper body, in my arms, in my swallowing, in my speaking, in my breathing. Thankfully, I'm very grateful for that.
That's incredible.
And especially because I've talked to other people who have been in the trial and who were in it earlier in the process than I was,
right? And
who experienced this same pause in the progression of the disease. I know how important it is to be able to continue to get the treatment, right? Because I'm happy now that I seem to have plateaued, but I know that's not going to last forever. And now I don't have access to NurOwn anymore. I'm finished with my participation in the trial. So
that's our problem, isn't it? We have some people now that have unequivocally stated, and I think everybody knows. I want to be clear: this is not a cure. Nobody's ever said that it is. This is a way to, you said it earlier, potentially add some runway to the airport of life, maybe, and to slow or halt the disease. We also know that some people clearly, as the phase 2 data showed, are not going to respond to this drug, whether or not they got the real drug or not. And that's just a hard fact of life. Just as in cancer, not everybody responds to every chemotherapy treatment the same way. But it's no reason to be negative on the drug or not approve the drug because it's not a quote home run. For what you experienced, what others have experienced is a home run of an order of magnitude for ALS that has never been seen before. This is truly man on the moon territory. And the reason that we do these videos is not to taunt other people or tease people with what they can't have. Right. It's to let them know that there is a therapy that is actually showing progress, because there are a number of people out there, Betsy, I'll just be honest with you, they are not convinced about this therapy. They are not convinced. And whether or not the number ends up being 1 in 10 or 4 in 10 or 6 in 10 that have a response, this is ALS. This is absolute war. It is, you have to do everything you can to try to save or extend your life. And that's what NurOwn is. It represents that kind of hope. It's a bridge. It's the first of many that are coming, of therapies that seem to be showing promise, including Tregs and others. But for you, you sound pretty certain. I mean, I'll be honest with you, you do, and you know your body better than anybody else.
Right. Right.
And so you're pretty convinced that during the trial that you really, slowed down at least, or kind of halted progressing then at that point. Is that kind of where you're
Yeah.
going with this?
Yeah. You're finished with your part in the trial. Is that
I
right?
am. Mhm.
Yeah. So they probably ask everybody the same question. I wasn't expecting it. And so
Mhm.
when my doctor asked me, what do you think you got from the trial? Initially,
That's right.
I thought it was like a philosophical question. I didn't realize that she was asking me, do you think you got the placebo or do you think you got NurOwn? And I was, I'm going to all talk about how I got hope and I got this and I got that.
Right.
And then I realized, oh no, you actually want me to tell you whether or not I think I got it. And I, I do. Like I don't think there's any other explanation for it. I mean,
Right.
I do, when I think about the progress of my disease in the, first 10 months before I had that injection, it was
Right.
on a pretty steady decline.
Right.
And
Fast
it
progressor.
stopped.
Mhm.
And I miss the independence and the mobility of my former self. But if NurOwn keeps me here for the rest of my life and I have a long life, that's a miracle, right? Well, it's science. It's not a miracle, but it's, for me, that's not nothing, right? That's
No.
huge.
It's incredible. It's similar to a moment where, in polio, where it was, a very terrible, terrible disease, and
Right.
we're not talking about that kind of curative effect with
Mhm.
NurOwn. I don't believe that. But here's what we don't know, frankly, is what happens with 6 doses? What happens with
Mhm.
8 doses, right? What
Right.
happens if you could walk in to Mass Gen right now, or go to Dallas, let's say, and
Mhm.
have one bone marrow aspiration every other year, because the company has said we
Mhm.
think we can continue to manufacture, uh, based on one aspiration, maybe, enough doses to keep you going for a while. But my
Right.
point here is what if you could go and get this procedure every 3 months? And I've heard
Right.
several people out there, frankly, in positions of authority, that are a little bit scary when they say things like, even including the AAN, the Association of Neurologists, American Association of Neurology, saying they think intrathecals are a cumbersome procedure for ALS, and they issued that letter. And this is part of our fight in ALS, frankly, is
Mhm.
people need to understand that we would be more than happy to go get an intrathecal every 3 months if it meant staying
Right.
where we are. Right?
Right.
Tell me your thoughts on some of that, and anything in general that you wanna talk about in relation to what we should be. Why science? Why should we wait on the data? What are we waiting on here? Right? I mean, we
Right. Well,
have phase 2 data.
yeah, it's you said this yourself many times, Mike, and I was thinking, uh, maybe in response to something that you had said or posted, but
Sure.
and here I'm just showing my age, but it reminds me of a scene from the movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Great
And
flick.
Paul Newman and Robert Redford are standing on a cliff, and they're about to be taken into custody or killed by law enforcement. And the only thing they can do is jump off the cliff into the raging river below. And Robert Redford's like, I'm afraid, because I don't know how to swim. And Paul Newman said, well, hell, the fall's going to kill you. And that's kind of what I feel like when people say to me, well, we don't know if NurOwn's safe. We don't know if Tregs is safe. I'm just like, I'm falling off a cliff here and
That's
I'm
right.
going to die. So
Yep.
if you pass me like an air balloon, I'm going to try it to stay alive, right? I mean, it
Absolutely.
doesn't, like, there's no worse alternative, right, than where this is headed and the path that it will take me on,
Right.
if it progresses to the end, right?
Right.
Nobody wants to see
No, nobody wants to go through that. And here's the thing. I mean, we know, safety is important. Okay. We get that. Nobody is suggesting that we should inject battery acid into our bodies here. Right. But the
Mhm.
fact is NurOwn has passed every safety trial thus far.
Exactly.
Phase 1, phase 2, and even a couple in
Mhm.
phase 3 now. There is no safety issue with this drug
Right.
because number one, it uses your own cells. So it's not
Right.
like you're injecting umbilical or other foreign matter into your
Mhm.
body. This is your own
Right.
body's material, period. So, and the other thing is people say, well, we need more data. We need the data. Well, we really don't. We have phase 2 data. The phase 2 data packet clearly showed efficacy. The trial was
Mhm.
not powered for efficacy, but it showed
Mhm.
efficacy. We have these anecdotal cases, right? And so, really, what we're doing when the FDA told Brainstorm at the end of phase 2, look, we really think you need to do a phase 3. That one decision, I want to be clear, that one decision, uh, unfortunately, sentenced thousands of Americans to a death without
Mhm.
ever being able to try this therapy. And that is to
Mhm.
me terrible. It's horrific that we have things for ALS. And this is not just about NurOwn. The battle that we fight is not just about NurOwn. Right now, there are at least 6 therapies for ALS that have all demonstrated an ability to slow or halt this disease. Doctors
Right.
like Stanley Appel do not make these kind of statements, lightly, without there being something to this.
Right.
I don't know if you got a chance, but at last year's event in June to meet Sharon Bradley, the wife of Larry Bradley, one of the men in the T-Reg trial, who also
Mhm.
stopped progressing that during that trial, and he was unequivocal about those results. And so,
Yeah.
um, we are I hate to say this, but we are allowing ALS to exist in its current form today in 2020. This is a choice. It's a choice based on the false assumption that we need more and more confirmatory data. Now, Dr. Appel's process is way further behind, NurOwn. I want to be clear about that. However,
Mhm.
I can guarantee you there'd be thousands of ALS patients, including me and probably you, that'd be willing to line up to get that
Mhm.
procedure right now.
Right.
Um, and the phase 2 trial is having some issues. We're going to have a big expose on that over the next few weeks coming out. And so this is a choice. This is a choice.
Mhm.
It's a matter of will now to allow you, as an American citizen, the right to continue taking
Mhm.
NurOwn. We don't know for sure you got it. I want to be clear about
Right.
that. And we don't
Right.
know that I
Right.
didn't get it. I may not be a
Right.
responder. But this is a terrible time for ALS because I'm not
Mhm.
sure what's worse, excuse me, is it when I was diagnosed, I was told the same thing you were. Just go home and get your affairs in order. And you accept that. And then to
Mhm.
know that you're getting I can't imagine what it feels like for you to get to stop getting worse. Like what that feels
Right.
like. I mean, I would love to know. I thought I did for a
Right.
very short time, like maybe
Mhm.
maybe a week, and then I realized nope. And then, but for you, like the feeling it must feel, and others that are sure. I mean, they just feel their bodies. They know their bodies. It must be an incredible feeling to stop dying temporarily. I hate to say those
Right.
terms,
Well,
but
I mean, it is, and my heart really breaks
yes.
for those families who were in the phase 2 trial
Mm,
or in the early parts of phase 3 who saw a benefit from it
yeah.
and who didn't live to see NurOwn approved. That's
It's terrible.
just
It's terrible.
that it is. It's like it's that is like I don't know how I could live with that. And I don't, I mean, I guess I want to ask the people who aren't giving it to us how they can live with that. But
We've
it is,
tried, and it's
yeah, yeah.
they just to them the answer is the science trumps everything.
Hmm.
There's nothing
Hmm.
else that matters
Hmm.
other than data. It's and that's our problem in this disease. Frankly, is unfortunately we don't have a biomarker that's totally reliable yet. We do think there are some that will be coming out of this phase 3 trial. For instance, Caspase 3, and there's some
Hmm.
others I've heard that may be reliable. But let's take for instance prostate cancer, right? Like
Hmm.
my father had prostate cancer, so I had to become somewhat of an expert on prostate cancer. And they have something in prostate cancer called PSA, and PSA is so accurate that with one blood test, they can tell you almost down to the millimeter how much cancer you have in your body, that these men have. And it's there. We may never have something like that in ALS, and we may never have a cure for ALS. We still don't for cancer. And so far too much time has been spent on data and on a cure. And all what we need, frankly, are treatments. That's what we need. We need to start somewhere, and then we go back. I read recently that Seneca, one of these other, I'm sorry, not Seneca, but I think it's NSI 566 is another stem cell product, but I read that it has the ability potentially to regenerate neurons. Now that's incredible news. And so I think what we've done is we've made a mistake in the ALS world. We've known about these stem cell procedures since as far back as 1999. They were touting these stem cell procedures, and yet nothing happened, right? No funding, nothing. And so they've slowly come along, including for other diseases like HIV, right? There's been 3 HIV cures now, supposedly, all with stem cells, autologous stem cells. So all these other things that are coming down the road, NSI 566, Seneca, AstroRx, NurOwn, these are autologous-based stem cell products, and it's pretty clear to me. I don't know how you feel, but it's pretty clear to me that somebody made a mistake along the way. They made a bad call here, and there's a little bit of ego involved to be able to maybe not admit this within the FDA. You know what I mean? And anyway, that's my little soapbox. But I think that it's pretty evident that stem cells something's going on here with ALS. I mean, I think it's
I don't, I think I have lots of days where I have different opinions on it. And
of course,
recently, Mike, you said something about, sort of comparing pharmaceutical research dollars for non-life threatening things like erectile dysfunction, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
that's one of my
honestly,
favorites.
like the amount of money that is spent on ad campaigns for erectile dysfunction would really do a lot for ALS research. And
You're
yet,
right.
That's not a cure for erectile dysfunction. As far as I know, you got to take it when you want the effects from it. So you know what I'm saying? They didn't say, oh no, we're not gonna put that on the market because it's not a cure.
Right.
It's a treatment, right? And you might have to take it every day if you want it to work every day. So I try not to go to the cynical place of driven by pharmaceutical companies or driven by dollars, and that every man on earth has the potential for wanting to use one of those drugs as opposed to ALS. But I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but if I need to take NurOwn and have those kinds of infusions every 3 months for the rest of my life, somebody's going to be making a lot of money off of that. So
you're right.
So
you're right.
It could be a win-win situation.
I agree with you, and I'm with you. As far as I know, last time I checked, we do still live in a capitalist society. For the most part, all that seems to be kind of a discussion right now, I guess. But the bottom line is if somebody can save your life, I don't really see why it's a big problem. They should make a few bucks. I mean, I'm not advocating in any way that for price gouging, like this insulin thing is ridiculous, right? I mean, what happened to those people is astronomical. Same thing with HIV. That one guy that went to jail didn't he go to jail over that HIV medication or something? That's ridiculous. And there's a lot of greed in pharma. There is. And one of the things we suffer from in ALS is it's a small disease. It's a boutique disease, so to speak. And they don't make a lot of money on us. The one thing, though, that we've learned recently, and I've used this other comparison with cystic fibrosis, is that that the results we get in ALS will be directly proportionate to the level of performance of the people who run this disease, right? And so you have a cystic fibrosis, a disease that is always fatal. And I interviewed a young man named Bobby Mahomes. I think everybody should watch that video because he experienced, in a lot of ways, what you did, except for his situation, it's more permanent. But
Hmm.
He was on the ropes, man. He was done. He was thinking, I need a lung transplant any second. I mean, he was done. And then Trikafta is approved from Vertex, right? And so
Hmm.
uh, immediately his life was completely turned around. It absolutely he experienced the dream of a lifetime. But in ALS, we don't we're not telling people to get ready for retirement. Like Bobby,
Hmm.
they told him, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, we're asking people to do last wills and testaments, and I think that's just, we've been hard on some people, but it's been needed because we have to
Hmm.
change the way we
Right.
do this and the way we operate this disease. We need help. We need people
Hmm.
to make these decisions, that these seemingly incredulous decisions of asking for, to advocate for home infusion before you ask for brand new bills that just came out. And
Right.
I do want to get your thought on that, by the way. What do you think
Mhm.
about these two new bills? Have you had a chance to look at them yet? What are your thoughts on them, Betsy? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really exciting time, and I think that um, if the bills become law, and
Hmm.
if people actually comply with the law, then we're going to be in great shape. I mean, I think
Yes.
the early access provisions that previously existed, people probably had hopes that that was going to be sufficient to
Right.
get those drugs in our bodies faster, but that clearly hasn't worked for NurOwn, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know what early
It didn't.
access is if we're still waiting for NurOwn, right? Um, but I'm very hopeful, and I guess I'm also um, I really do think that the game changer here is hearing from people living with ALS, right?
Yes.
Pals and their families.
Yes.
Um, and that really, I think that has made all of the difference,
Agree.
because it's not this disease. People with this disease, I think, are being treated um, by their hometown neurologists who are not researchers, who are not necessarily 100% on top of the latest clinical trials and what's happening with them. And so, if you're someone like me or
Hmm.
you who has the luxury of being able to do the research on
Right.
your own, and
Right.
the luxury of finding people like you and others who can help put me on the right track, that's one thing. But there are so many people out there that are getting their diagnosis and going home, right? Because
Yes.
they're not in a place where they can access that hope,
That's right.
because nobody's telling them what's going on, and
That's
it's
right.
either too far, too expensive, too hard. And it shouldn't be, right? It shouldn't be that way. I know that
Agree.
that's probably true for other diseases, even cancer, right? That people who are, who live in remote areas, who don't have the financial resources, who don't have good health insurance, et cetera, et cetera.
No doubt.
Um, but it is shocking to me. Um, it is shocking to me at times how little people seem to know about this disease, and um, how little they expect people who are living with the disease to know about the disease. Right?
Absolutely.
I got screened in for one of the sites for the new platform trial in a phone call last week.
Great.
And
Good for you.
I think the person who, well, I mean, I haven't, they haven't officially accepted me, but in that conversation, I think the person talking to me was really surprised about how much I knew about the trial, about what the exclusionary factors were,
Absolutely.
about all of the, how many visits would be required. And I thought, really all you got to do is go to clinicaltrials.gov, it's right there. But
Right.
he was kind of stunned that I knew some stuff. And I
Yep.
thought, yeah, it really does matter when the people who are getting the disease have some information, right?
Yeah.
And know what's possible, and aren't willing to sit around and tell people and be told by people that everything is impossible, right?
I could not agree with you more. That's such a great point because the first thing that every ALS patient does, or many of us, we become researchers, right? And so there's actually a doctor in our group. He's an anesthesiologist, had a great practice. He's extremely sharp, obviously, as you would expect. But he told me one time, he said the amount of educational material that doctors are given about ALS is almost nothing because there's nothing you can do. So they understand the basic disease, maybe literally 4 to 5 pages about this disease. I have generally found that while patients, we may not understand the pathology and the actual physiology of the disease, but we know way more about this disease in most cases than 90% of your practicing neurologists. And I say that obviously cautiously, but I mean it sincerely, because when I talk to neurologists now, most of them have no idea about any of what I tell them. None.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. That's a problem. Patients are leading the way.
I knew one person in my life before my diagnosis who had been diagnosed with ALS. It was an old friend of my parents years ago when I was, a teenager. And he's the only, and at the time, of course, he seemed to me like he was 100 years old. I didn't really know him. I wasn't around him when he at the sort of end of his life. But I never, I never paid attention to it. It just never occurred to me that it was, that it was something to be worried about or something that would ever impact me or anybody I know.
Right. It's the disease somebody else always gets. It's the odds are so low, 6 in 100,000 or whatever. But I don't know about you, but I feel like it's growing. It's getting larger, and that's probably underreported. Of course, it could be just because, I have the disease, so we're naturally more aware of it. But it just seems like more people now know about this. They understand what it is. I don't think we really have an awareness problem in ALS so much anymore as we do just a flat out action problem. We don't have a willingness to finally say, just fix this. Like if people could see what people on that we see online, people, and this is public info. So, but people I watch on caregivers, like a guy like a Steve Martin, it's just a sweetheart kind of guy, and to watch those people just literally melt like snowmen in front of their family's eyes. I mean, if people could just see that, they would just say, look, just fix it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you're telling me there are things that can stop or help this disease and you guys can't get to them? Most people are stunned to hear that because they automatically assume ALS, death sentence, nothing you can do. And that is not the case. It's ALS, death sentence. We can't get to them. And that's the problem, right? As we start 2020. So, well, this has been fascinating. Do you have anything else you want to add before I'll just ask you a freewheeling question, let you talk, or if you want to rant, if you want to talk about anything, this is your chance. And go ahead.
Mike, I guess the thing that I want to say, and this maybe follows up on my comment before, that until I had my diagnosis, I didn't know anybody that had this disease. And most of the people that I have met since that time, I have either met through the clinical trial or at ALS treatment centers,
right?
Or locally, like in a ALS organization meetings, etc. It really it really is so, I feel like for me, because one of the things I've done in my professional life is be an advocate for underserved, vulnerable people. I really do feel like, since I still have relative good health and a lot of people don't have access to the resources that I do,
right,
that I have I have an obligation to do what I can to like shout from the rooftops about this. And, and I'm like, sorry to all my friends on Facebook if you're sick of hearing about ALS, but
right.
That's kind of my life right now. And you're going to hear about it. And if you're sick about hearing about it, imagine how I feel about living with it.
Oh, man, totally.
So, and there are, I noticed the other day that, I Am ALS has set up this program on their website where people can go in and identify themselves. So they're trying to create a geographical picture of where people with ALS live. And honestly, you would think there are only 6 people in Oklahoma that have ALS,
right?
And we know that's not true.
Of course.
So I just want to go out and like say to everyone, your voice needs to be heard, right? Like we need to count you. We need to let our representatives know that you are here and you matter. And so
Absolutely.
luckily they have your voice coming from Oklahoma, and and I think that's a really important voice, and those of us that have the ability, either physically or otherwise, to keep shouting from the rooftops about this, I think really need to do it.
I could not agree more with you, and that's what I would like to add to your comment. It's well placed and right on the money that 12 to 14 months ago when we started this effort, No More Excuses, and it was a little, people thought, well, it's a little divisive, it's a little too hot for us to handle, and I would say to that, yes, it is. What we do is a strategy, it's not a lifestyle, but the bottom line, as you just said it, we have to speak up right now. This is the most critical time in ALS, because if we don't push the issue right now, we're going to continue, as Brian Wallach the other day said, just tweeted, and you're right, Brian's done a lot for this fight, and but he tweeted, 150 years of failure is going to continue, essentially, kind of paraphrasing here, but and he's right. I mean, failure is a term that we've used quite a bit at No More Excuses, and we'll continue to use it, because if you have a drug for ALS and you can't get to it, to me, that's failure. And so we're kind of past, we're getting past the point of blame, but we've got to correct the deficiencies and make sure that as we move forward, and you know this from being in the legal profession, you know this, that you've got to make sure that you correct the deficiencies, and that these legal pathways for approval, that without them, we're kind of up the creek, right? And that's been our problem, is we can't get the FDA to make a decision based on compassion. It will not do it. There has to be a legal pathway. These bills hopefully will provide that, with 7071 and 3890. I can't remember now. It's just a crazy afternoon, but I think it's 3891. Let me look here, because now it's gonna bother me. 3872. Sorry. These bills are critical, because especially 3872, because it provides a way for to establish a center of excellence inside the FDA, which is huge, and also direct funding for ALS therapies, for treatment, for expanded access. And that's what people need to understand about these bills. It's not just the conditional approval and 7071. It's these bills, they provide a fifth pathway, a new pathway, legal pathway at the FDA, and they also provide funding for these therapies, right? And so just like for COVID-19, we have a chance with this bill both of these bills to actually create the pathway. In other words, throw a block, make the hole, let them run through there, and then pay for them as well with $75 million. That is huge. That is groundbreaking, and I don't know why anybody would not immediately start fighting their butts off for these two bills. That
I don't know either.
We've got to have them, and we're going to continue to do that as well. So, well, I want to say thank you today for what you've done and for speaking out. I'm so glad we finally got to meet. You're right, Donna told me about you immediately, and she told me that you were kind of a law professor, and I was thinking, oh my God, I've got to talk to her. And it took a little while for people. This is normal in ALS to get ready to breach that time period, right, where you're finally ready to fight. And I want to say thank you for doing what you've done, and also to everybody in the NurOwn trial. You mentioned earlier the people in phase 2, people like Mike Zimbura and a guy like Bobby Forster and these other people, and frankly, the people in phase 3 who really lost that bet, and a guy like Chuck Harkins, military veteran, career man, in the military for a long time, and what's happened to these people is tragic, because they've been kind of used in the name of science, and I hate to say that, but I don't think there's any question about that, and that's a real tragedy. And those people are very much heroes for what they've done. They really are. And so I want to say thank you. Enjoy the rest of this 100-degree temperature today here in Oklahoma. It gets very hot here, but it is June already. Seems like it kind of snuck up on us, didn't it?
I know, right?
Thank you so much, and we'll talk again soon. Let's stay in touch, and hope that your success with NurOwn continues. Allegedly, we don't know, but hopefully, we'll get you some more. All right, thank you so much. All right, okay.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, everybody, there you have it. Betsy McCormick. What a fascinating interview. I mean, we had so much more, and I just had to, frankly, cut it out because it was too long. The conversation we had was fantastic, and I may offer that in full at a later date. We had a lot more to get to, and we just, I just couldn't get it in, and try to keep my videos at a reasonable length. And there was so much more, but I guess the point of this is that I hope that you, as the ALS patient now in 2020, as we come into summer here, and as we look back at over the last 14 months of advocacy and fighting so hard for access to this therapy, I hope that if you're a new patient, now you can see why there is so much hope in ALS. But if you've been following us for a while, I hope you can also see why we've been so aggressive in our action. We have been relentless for a reason. It's because we're choosing to let people die right now from this disease without ever having a chance. And I hope that we've learned a big lesson here. We're not going to stop trying. I want to make it clear. But we're running out of options. We have these 2 new bills, and then we essentially have an executive option that frankly, the community has been unwilling to pursue. And that, my friends, has been one of our biggest mistakes in this community, putting politics and personal vendettas or whatever, not to be able to put those aside and to make the clear choices. We knew this 14 months ago was going to happen. We said it was going to happen. We asked for help, and many of you did. Unfortunately, when I say many, that's perhaps only 5 to 10% of the ALS community. If we had you fighting, if you're watching this for the first time, if we had 50% of the ALS community fighting, plus a few big, large organizations fighting the way National Kidney Foundation did, this whole outcome could be totally different right now. And that's what I want to get across to you, is that come join us at No More Excuses, please. And we will show you a better way to do this. We have to go after every single option possible right now. So go to Facebook, find No More Excuses, join our group, please, and follow my Twitter feed at this address right here. And I'll show you, our group will show you how to fight for access. Please put politics aside, fight for every angle, because we need a perfect triad of activism. We need bills and we need executive action. Now, that doesn't mean that the president can order NurOwn to be approved. That's nothing. We've never asked for that. Just like the National Kidney Foundation did not get an executive order that approved a single new drug. It revolutionized and changed their whole world, and that is the way that we're going to get the proper attention. This is a fight. It's a battle. We're not going to get one particular drug named in an executive order, but what we've said from the beginning, for those who have been paying attention, is that what we can get is funding, expanded access programs, other ways of doing things. You don't have to name a specific product. For instance, all phase 3 drugs that have passed safety trials. These are the kind of things that we can get done with executive action that could, in a roundabout way, get us what we want or speed this process up. And I urge you, put politics aside right now and ask for your life. That's what we have to do. I'm asking you to do that, and we'll show you how at No More Excuses. I want to say thank you today for watching this video. I know it's long. I want to say thanks to Betsy. She did a fantastic job, and you can tell she's a lawyer because the case has been made in her mind about NurOwn's efficacy and safety. So let's just get it done. Let's put politics aside. Let's work together. And if the big ALS organizations won't help, we'll continue to go around them and behind them and in front of them. And that's what we'll do. All right. So I want to thank you again. We'll talk to you all real soon. Bye-bye.